Okay, so let's dive into what is honestly one of the greatest intellectual detective stories of all time. We're going to unravel a puzzle that kicked off way back in the 17th century and took, get this, over 350 years and some of the most brilliant minds in history to finally crack.
And it all starts right here, with this equation. I know, it looks deceptively simple, right? Kind of like something you'd see in a high school math class, but with one tiny little tweak that changes everything. This equation would become one of the most famous and notoriously difficult problems in the entire history of mathematics.
And this is the guy who started it all. With this one tantalizing little note scribbled in the margin of a book, a 17th century French judge and, this is key, amateur mathematician named Pierre de Fermat threw down a challenge that would just echo through the centuries, infuriating and inspiring generations of thinkers. So what made this problem so special? I mean, why did it seem so utterly impossible to solve for so long? Let's break it down. Okay, so you definitely remember Pythagoras' theorem from school. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Works like a charm for right-angled triangles. 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. Perfect. And there are tons of other whole number solutions just like it. But here's the twist Fermat came up with. He said, what if it changed that little power of 2 to any other whole number? To 3, or 4, or 5, or 5 million. He claimed that suddenly there are 0 whole number solutions that can make it work. None, ever. And proving that absolute, universal never, well, that's what made it so ridiculously hard. So for the next 300+ years, an incredible cast of characters tried and failed to find Fermat's so-called marvelous proof. Seriously, the list of people who took a crack at this thing reads like a who's who of math history. And this timeline just shows you the sheer scale of the challenge. I mean, look at these gaps. More than a century goes by before the great Leonhard Euler, one of the titans, manages to prove it just for the number 3. Then another 50 years until the next major breakthrough. It was this slow, agonizing crawl, with geniuses dedicating their entire lives to just taking one tiny step forward.
And among all these giants, Sophie Germain's story is just, wow. It's so powerful. In a time when women were completely barred from formal education, she taught herself advanced math in secret. The story goes her parents even took away her candles to stop her, so she'd study at night in the freezing cold wrapped in blankets. Her work was a massive leap forward, a whole new way of thinking about the problem. And yet, when she died, her death certificate just dismissed this incredible mind, listing her as a single woman with no profession. Just unbelievable.
So after all that, the trail went cold for over a century. It was like all the traditional methods had just hit a brick wall. To solve this ancient problem, a completely radical new idea was needed, and it came from a really unexpected place, post-war Japan. An idea that connected two completely different areas of math that nobody, and I mean nobody, thought were related. So, back in the 1950s, two young Japanese mathematicians, Yutaka Taniyama and Goro Shimura, came up with this really wild idea, a conjecture. It was so out there, so bold, that most people just didn't know what to make of it. They were basically suggesting there was a secret link between two vastly different mathematical universes. Now, to really get what they were proposing, you gotta picture how math was kind of structured. Think of it less as one big continent and more like a bunch of isolated islands. You had the island of geometry, with shapes and stuff. You had the island of number theory, with patterns and numbers. And each island had its own unique language, its own tools, and honestly, the people on one island rarely talked to the people on another. And what Taniyama and Shimura were saying was revolutionary. They were proposing to build a bridge between two of the most remote and complex islands out there, the world of elliptic curves, that's a geometry thing, and the world of modular forms, a super abstract number theory thing. They claimed that deep down, these two totally different concepts were actually the same thing, just speaking different languages. The mathematician Barry Mazur put it perfectly. He said this wasn't just a bridge, it was a mathematical Rosetta Stone. It meant you could take a super hard problem on one island, translate it, send it over the bridge to the other island, solve it there using totally different tools, and then bring the answer back. It was a potential game changer. For decades, this obscure Japanese idea was mostly ignored by the mainstream. That is, until it became the secret weapon for one man on a lonely, completely obsessive quest. Okay, stick with me, because this is where it all clicks together. It's like a perfect chain of logic. First, a mathematician showed that if,
and that's a big if, a solution to Fermat's equation existed, you could use it to build a really, really weird elliptic curve, a true mathematical monster. Then, another guy proved that this monster curve was so bizarre it could never cross that bridge. It couldn't be modular. But wait, the Taniyama-Shimura conjecture said that every single elliptic curve has to be modular, no exceptions. So you see the final move? If you can prove the conjecture is true, then you prove the monster curve can't exist. And if the monster can't exist, then neither can the solution to Fermat's theorem that created it. Checkmate.
And that number, 7 years, that's how long Andrew Wiles, a Princeton professor who had been obsessed with Fermat since he was a kid, worked in complete secrecy in his attic to do just that. For 7 straight years, he told no one but his wife, pouring his entire professional life into building that bridge and proving that conjecture.
So it's June 1993. After 7 years of silent, intense work, Andrew Wiles was finally ready. He decided to reveal his solution to the world during a series of lectures at Cambridge University. Can you imagine being in that room? For 3 days, he lays out this incredibly dense argument. The atmosphere is electric. At the very end of the final lecture, he writes Fermat's last theorem on the blackboard, turns to the stunned audience, and just says, "I think I'll stop here." The room just erupted. The 358-year-old problem was solved. Or so it seemed. But the story wasn't quite over. See, when you claim to solve something this big, your work has to be checked by other experts. And during that peer review process, they found a gap. A subtle but very serious hole in a critical part of his logic. After all that euphoria, Wiles was faced with the devastating possibility that his entire life's work was wrong. For over a year, Wiles struggled to fix the error. He was on the verge of admitting defeat. Then, one day, he had this sudden flash of insight. The solution was in an old technique he had given up on years before. Working like crazy with his former student Richard Taylor, he finally closed the gap, and this right here just shows you the perfect modern ending to this ancient problem. An email sent out to the math world announcing that the proof was finally and truly complete. So why does any of this matter, right? Why spend centuries and entire careers on some abstract problem with no obvious practical use? What was the real prize here? Because here's the thing. The true importance, the real legacy of this whole saga isn't just that a 358-year-old riddle was solved. It's that in solving it, Andrew Wiles proved the Taniyama-Shimura conjecture was true. He built that impossible bridge. He proved that two distant, alien mathematical worlds were, in fact, secretly one and the same. And Wiles's proof has breathed new life into an even bigger, even more ambitious idea called the Langlands program. You can think of it as a blueprint for a grand unified theory of mathematics. It suggests that there aren't just one or two of these bridges, but a whole web of them, connecting dozens of those other mathematical islands. Wiles's work was the first spectacular piece of evidence that this grand unification might actually be possible. And that leaves us with a final, pretty profound thought. The story of Fermat's last theorem showed us this deep, hidden unity between worlds we all thought were separate. And it just makes you wonder, if those two distant worlds were secretly connected all along, what other hidden bridges are out there, in math and maybe everywhere else, just waiting for the right person to find them?